the pleasure of writing, of the actual writing process, for me, and I guess for a lot of people, is extremely restricted, which is to say that you write a poem, and for a day you think you've validated your existence, and you think you may have made that match between the idea that you had in your head before you set out and what exists on the page. And then on the second day, sounds rather biblical this, but on the second day you realise that the gap is much wider than you thought. So that pleasure therefore dissipates. So I think it's an intrinsically unpleasurable experience. I don't mean to say that by that it's unpleasant in the way that gouging potatoes out of the earth on a rainy day might be, or digging coal even might be. It always annoys me rather, in fact more than rather, when writers complain about the hard work of their work, because other people in those sorts of ways work much harder than we do. But there is something intrinsically difficult about it in that kind of way, intrinsically disappointing about it in that sort of way. And that sounds like a bad news story, but actually I think it's rather a good news story, because it's, if you've got the bit between your teeth, if it's the thing that you think you should be doing with your life, that is the thing, which means that you get up the next day and try and do better. So Beckett's remark about failing better seems to me exactly right. That's the trajectory that everybody is on. I've spent a lot of my life trying to demystify poems, in the sense that I think that poetry is essentially a very primitive thing, a fundamental thing, like breathing, and it is, of course, profoundly to do with breath. We say a poem, and poems must be heard aloud as well as seen on the page, and the way that the poem communicates itself is to do with the way that we breathe it. So yes, a lot of the work that I've done in my life is to do with questions of accessibility in one way or another, demystifying, as you rightly say. But I think that poems, again, by definition, establish themselves in the world and in our minds by the richness of the mystery that they contain. Every other sort of text that we read, even novels, generally speaking, are things which want to say and then, and explain, and expand, and expatiate in kind of more or less rational and logical ways. In sort of high modernist things, maybe not, but by and large that's what they take pleasure in doing, and they do it very fascinatingly. Poems don't want to do that. I mean, the poems I like, I have to say, don't want to do that. They tell the truth by different means. They leap around. They exist at a point where rational discourse meets a language that doesn't precisely make sense. So you want to both make this accessible and at the same time insist on the mystery, because the poetry consists in the mystery in an important way. It is in the nature of commissioned work, or in the commissioning of work, to invite a writer or a sculptor or a musician or whoever it might be to go in through the front door of the subject. And I, as a matter of fact, think that the best art that gets made is produced by people who don't go in through the front door. It's produced by people who go in through the side door, or the back door, or drop down the chimney, or in through the window, and somehow kind of burgle it, surprise it, and are themselves surprised in the process. Commissioned work wants it to be full-on, direct, and you can produce good things like that. If you're a satirist, you can certainly produce good things like that. And I suppose if you're putting something up on the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square, you can do something that might make a statement of one kind or another. But I don't really like art that makes statements. I like things that are more subtle. So I found that very, very difficult to deal with when I was laureating, and it was therefore a huge relief to me, pleased as I was to do it, honoured as I was to do it, a huge relief to me when I stopped doing it, because I could go back into my way of standing in the wings and seeing things from a different angle. Emily Dickinson, the great 19th century American poet, says, as you probably know, tell all the truth, but tell it slant. That's a very good motto for writers and painters and choreographers, for all I know, to have. And it's hard to tell it slant when you're laureate, but it's comparatively easy to tell it's like when you're not. So I felt, for that reason, among many others, that my life as a writer, my life as a creator had been given back to me when I stopped. So thank God I said I'd do it for 10 years. I mean, there are quite a lot of people in the past, as you might expect me to say. The past is longer than our present. So people who work in what critics call the English line tend to be those that have meant most to me: Wordsworth, Hardy, and then coming into the more nearly present, Larkin and Ted Hughes. I mean, those are the people. Edward Thomas, perhaps actually particularly, who I wrote my graduate thesis on, and still burns very bright in my mind. One of the weird things about getting older is that writers younger than me, however brilliant I think they are, and there are quite a lot of them out there who I admire very much, often oddly don't speak to me as directly as the mighty dead do. I'm not alone in this, I think. It's just a fact of getting older. But there is one young poet younger than me who speaks to me very powerfully, and that's somebody we heard earlier this evening, actually, Alice Oswald, who I think is a really seriously wonderful poet. And it's a treat to be alive at the same time as her.